right? Is our
So guys, thanks for coming. I'm Alan Paul. This is Jay Collins, saxophone. Gregg Allman Band, of course.
Okay.
Peter Levin, keyboards. And Scott Sharrard. So we're here to talk about the making of Southern Blood. I think to really understand it, appreciate it a little more, you have to understand where Gregg was in his life and in his health. So, was it clear to you guys that this was going to be his last hurrah? I mean, how aware were you?
I was probably the first person in the band to know that he got a terminal diagnosis. That was about 2 years before we did, or a year and a half before we did Southern Blood, I think.
2014.
That was it. That was when he told me about it.
Was it a burden for you at all to have that knowledge and not be able to share it with anyone, including, I think, like these guys?
The context he told me about it is we were writing that song together, My Only True Friend, and I think he felt like he wanted me to know, as the guy was writing the song with him, this might be his last, composition.
Pete, were you, like, when you went into the studio at Muscle Shoals, were you feeling like this is Gregg's last hurrah?
I did sort of have a feeling that, things would probably be, slowing down, maybe, in terms of touring. But yeah, I was definitely more focused on just trying to, really be a part of making the best record we could make.
And Jay, you were the longest tenured guy in the band, right? So
Yeah.
when did you join the Gregg Allman Band?
I joined 2001. Was that when the World Trade Center thing happened?
Yeah.
That's when I joined, because that happened like literally a week after I joined the band, and I was in Savannah.
So Gregg went through a lot of changes personally in terms of what he was looking for musically. Did his behavior change? I mean, when I say behavior, what I mean is like the way he interacted with you guys as a band, the way he treated the Gregg Allman Band.
When I first joined the band, there was kind of this sense of like, don't talk to Gregg. There was a little bit of that. Like everybody was kind of like, go through the management, and there was a little more of that kind of thing happening. But I think by the time he had our group, and probably around when Bruce Katz was in it too, he started to kind of loosen. I think he was looser, and it felt a lot more like just a regular hang with any musician, really. He's just a regular one of us, sort of more, than it was early on. Yeah. So I think he got more comfortable with the band.
Gregg really did love this band. He loved playing with you guys. He told me that, every time I spoke to him over the last few years, he would go out of his way. Did he communicate that kind of stuff to you or to any of you?
I found him to be very, very sweet and complimentary, a lot of times.
And for the band too. I mean,
Yeah.
he had a lot of nice things to say about the band over and over. He used to shout us all out in the articles and everything, and talk about the band and say how happy he was with it. I mean, more so than any individuals, you know what I mean?
So Jay and Scott, as musical directors, maybe everyone might not understand what that means. Could you explain it a little bit?
Before Scott was the musical director, I was the musical director right after Neil Larson left the band. But just to answer that, doing the set lists, and then Scott, when I was doing it, I would do the set list. Scott also, and when you would bring those to him, he would look at it, and he might make some changes. There was that, and there was running the sound checks, because Gregg didn't want to go to sound check. He would come to sound check every once in a while if he wanted to do something, but otherwise Scott would run the sound check, or when I was doing it, I would do it. But just to say, the musical director thing, when I was doing it, changed a lot from me to Scott, because in the years I was doing it, the band was fluctuating a lot. I mean, we were having a different guitar player every other tour. We had a different bass player every tour. It was like there was a lot of searching going on. There was a lot of people in and out. Gregg wouldn't be happy with this. He would change that. And so by the time the band had gotten a little more solid, that's about when it switched over to Scott. Like, right, wouldn't you say? I mean, right.
It was really the back to making live record, because that was we kind of did that one together, and then he was like, "Look, I need you." He was like, I need you to help me like find some more guys. And I think
and also there was a guitar thing too. I felt like there was a connection there where it was like he was playing guitar, you guys would stand up there and go through stuff with the guitar, and you would show him something and he would show you something, and there was like some of that stuff too, and it was, and then that's when we added the horns from Memphis too. We went back to having a full horn section, which Gregg loved.
You did have a lot of turnover, and there were some very great musicians in the band who got replaced. Did he leave that to you, or you, like the musical director? Did you have to call people and tell them they weren't on the next
No.
Our road manager really enjoyed firing.
Yes.
And I tried to fire people, and he would always be like, "No, please let me do it. Please let me do it." And I was like, "All right, As far as the firings go, they were always the right call.
It just took a while.
They were for a variety of different reasons, but the reason he had a musical director is because he was, I guess, rightfully. I mean, he was the boss. He was insulating himself from those kind of decisions. I think by the time Gregg got around to asking me to do it, it became a thing of like he knew that the Allman Brothers was coming to an end, and he was getting a little bit concerned with reinventing himself and like making sure that every piece of the puzzle was the right person. And also the writing thing, the main thing for Gregg and I was like we really hit it off as songwriters. I think he also wanted like there was something about being downstage next to him that he was comfortable with. It started with his brother and then Warren and Dickie. Like there was a communication thing there as well on stage of like it's like I always describe this band as being like the greatest basketball team I've ever played on. Like whenever we run the basketball down the court, everybody's got it. Like knows how to get to the hoop. Everybody knows when to step back and let the guy who can make the shot make the shot. It's not about like who's going to make the shot. The music comes first. I think Gregg he made this turn in his life where he decided the Allman Brothers are my brother's band. I've always known it in the back of my head, and I'm gonna take this because he had a new lease on life thing going. And I think when he got the liver transplant, it was successful. He said, "That's it. I'm gonna get out of the Brothers. I'm gonna do my thing." And I think that's when the transition happened. We spent so much time together writing these songs, these 2 songs that we finished, and even some other things that never got finished, and some cover songs ideas of mine that he was into and stuff. Like we just spent so much time together that I think it got to the point where he was like, he needed more help to get the right pieces in place.
He had a very different vision of what he wanted the guitarist to do in his band than.
Well, he never saw it as different.
Yeah,
he saw it as the original concept. And he would say this to me over and over again.
Well, also he wanted horns. I think Gregg's vision for his thing was not only did he have the songs that he had written that the Allman Brothers didn't play, but also in the choice of covers, material. It was definitely kind of going a little more towards the R&B,
right, for sure.
A little more towards the kind of Memphis R&B flavor than the psychedelic kind of jam out for a long time. Because although Gregg liked people, he really enjoyed great instrumentalists, and if you played a good solo, my experience was Gregg would come up after the gig and he'd say, "Man, that was a great solo." Yeah, brother, whatever. But he really didn't like long, he would get bored, man, after 10 minutes of guitar soloing, so for his band, he wanted to always, I found it was like more, he wanted things to be a little more compact.
Right. How specific was he to you in giving directions?
I'll tell you, and it's funny, I thought about this. Gregg said in the entire time, there was one time he only said something to me about changing what I was doing, and one time, and he was so cool about that. I mean, at least with me, just being a piano player, I thought I'd probably be under the gun a lot more than most, but it was just the opposite. Really, the only thing he ever said to me was he used to let me open up on the intro to Ain't Wasting Time, and when I started a couple times, I would go a little long and get into it, and he came up to me, and after maybe it was my fourth gig, doing it with him, and he was like, he goes, "Hey, bro, I need you to get to the point a little sooner." That was the only thing he ever said. That was it.
So now we have got the big picture of what the relationship was like, I think. So let's talk a little bit about Southern Blood specifically. So the songs on it, once the album came out, it's and of course he was deceased, he was gone when the album came out, and so hearing him sing some of those songs was incredibly powerful, like Going, Gone, Black Muddy River, and of course Once I Was a Hunter, and of course the song you guys wrote, and it's like, so was there a sense of heaviness as you recorded them, and did you know how Gregg reacted? Like was it his vision to have that type of material, or was it Don Was?
I think Don Was steered him in that direction. Look, I mean, how we could have had the best last Gregg Allman record is if we'd lived in a house in Sarasota for a year. That's pretty much how it would have happened. And you would have had like 5 more songs out of him. But the way the music business is now, even if you're Gregg Allman, if you don't tour, you can't do anything like that. So we were on the road all the time to pay for everything, to pay for his 9-piece band, to pay for, because with royalties being down, 70-80% for everybody, including these musicians, there was no way to keep this whole production on the road without touring. So, and then he had all the health problems. So it was like touring, health problems, and then, hey, Scott, come down to my house and write a song for a day. And then, all right, we're back on the road, and then I'm too tired to write. I'm going to sleep all day because I have to do the show. It was constantly trying to play catch-up. I was really enthused to get more original material, and that was one of the things I did, was get Pete to come down with me one time in the house. And Pete and Gregg had started writing some songs too, and I think a lot of that, if we hadn't run out of time because of all this, busy work to keep the lights on, we would have had more of a chance. But that's just, that's a whole other side trip of how screwed up the music business is now. But we had a great hang there for a couple days, and when I saw that little hang, I was like, oh man, if we all spend more time together, we could all be writing with. I mean, that's really, if it was the 70s when record albums were the iPhone, that's what would have happened. Somebody would have been like, here guys, here's a salary, and go write songs with Gregg, and we would have made the record. Like the way Laid Back was done.
Could you tell the story a little bit about how you came up with the last verse for My Only True Friend?
Writing that song is a long story, but so the last verse was written in Muscle Shoals at the studio. I think you guys remember. Maybe you guys have some perspective to share on this. I don't know, but we had gotten halfway through the week, and I don't know if you remember me complaining about. I don't think Gregg's going to cut this song, and he's going to end up doing an album of all covers as his last album, and I was bitching at Quinones, like I would do. Mark Quinones, our percussionist, saying, because Mark, had been working with Gregg for 25 years, so they had this amazing rapport, and Gregg had so much respect for Mark. So whenever I would hit a wall with Gregg, and there was a lot of times that would happen, it was part of our process, I would always go to Quinones or Chank, depending on, if it was really serious, I would go to Chank. If it was, and I did. I had to go to him a few times. But if it was music related, I'd always go to Quinones. And I went to him and I said, Mark, I don't think he's going to cut this song. He keeps saying it doesn't sound like it's finished. I don't know if we're going to be able to cut it. And Don Was at that point was kind of just, again, this was yet another process in this band where we were rushing. It's like the Rolling Stones take a year to make a record. We had 7 days to make the whole record. So Don is used to dealing with people like the Rolling Stones, where it's like he can get time to kind of. So I think he kind of got to this point with the song where he kind of stepped back, and he was like, Sharrard, you got to figure this out. So Quinones said to me, he had a cocktail napkin, and he had written like 4 lines, and he goes, here, take this. He goes, what do you think about this? And I go, well, what is this? And he goes, well, what do you think about writing a 3rd verse for the song? And basically, I looked at it, and I threw out the cocktail napkin, and I went back to my room, and I sat that night, and I was just sitting thinking about it, and I was thinking, how am I going to do this? And the last verse is, still on and on I roam, it feels like home's just around the bend. I've got so much left to give, but I'm running out of time, my friend. So I always say the last verse is me saying, shit, dude, you got to record this song. You're running out of time. And I think that's where my head was at. Everything up to that part was done. It just needed it. Apparently, he thought it needed something else, and Quinones had this idea. He said, try to write a third verse.
Desperation is the mother of invention.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and I should say, I wrote it. I had handwritten it on his lyric sheet, and I handed it to him. I remember this. I handed it to him the next day. He had his glasses on. I remember this moment. He looked at it, and he read it, and he was like, "Okay, let's cut it." And that's the vocal that's on the record.
Yeah. And it's amazing because it sounds like he's living in the song. It's amazing. He's basically reading the lyrics.
He was literally reading it scrawled on the paper when he cut it.
When Gregg became really ill, and it was apparent to me, to a lot of people, that he was, canceled these shows, so he canceling a lot of shows, and there were rumors abounding and stuff. And then I heard at some point, well, this last record's not finished; it's never going to come out. And did you ever have that sense? Was that ever like an internal sense in the band?
Well, he was supposed to come back in and do some more singing because there were tracks that hadn't been.
Well, some people don't know. I spent 2 days with him in Savannah trying to produce vocals because Don wasn't available.
Yeah.
This was the kind of stuff we were always up against with the gig economy that we all fight every day and what music business has become. There were these windows to get it done that kept closing. And as his health was deteriorating, the windows kept closing. And then Gregg booked a studio in Savannah, and he called me and he goes, "I booked a studio. Don's not available. Come down." And I spent 2 days with him in the studio in Savannah trying to get vocals.
Did you guys get
he couldn't hit the notes anymore.
Yeah.
This was the beginning of the end of what his situation in his chest that was fucking with his vocal cord.
It's
The tumor was pressing against the cord,
too.
and that also.
So Scott, you were one of the few people really who spent time with him during that period. So you have Gregg, one of the greatest singers of all time, and he's in the studio and he can't sing effectively. He can't sing the way he wants or good enough for a record. Did he show emotion? Was that did he? Because it sounds like that would just be terrible. It's a debilitating thing. It's like
he
being with Usain Bolt when he can't walk.
He was definitely. He was freaked out by it, but he just kept pushing, man. There was a quality in him at the end of his life he was extremely, extremely brave. And it wasn't until the last 5 or 6 months of his life that it got really tough, because then he couldn't speak. And that's when it got really tough. When I was working with him on that session, I was referring to, he could sing like a verse, a chorus of something, but he'd get tired fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once you got to that point and you realized, okay, he's not going to record any more vocals, was it clear to you that that there was enough here?
Oh, yeah.
The album? Yes,
I thought the rough sounded great.
Yeah, and I want to say something about that because I had people after the record came out coming to me and saying things like, because Don he had put a lot of extra things on, and there's a lot of more backing vocals and all this kind of stuff. And honestly, the raw tapes, from the session before all that, Gregg sounds great. And then I had people come to me and saying, "Well, I heard, they put all that extra stuff on there because he wasn't that strong." I'm like, no, that was not true. He sang beautifully at Muscle Shoals. It was that happened just after that, I think.
Yeah.
He still had 90%, I would say. To me.
In some of Gregg's later shows, I thought that he sounded great, but he didn't have the stamina. So by the second half of the show, he'd be tailing off. But he would usually start off, I thought, really strong.
Yeah.
That was my impression. Is that how it felt?
It was different night to night, I think, at that point. We had nights where he sounded like he was 20 years old.
Yeah.
Then there would be other nights where, for whatever reason, the health, he was tired.
We all grew up playing with older guys. All of us in this band. The biggest bond in this band is that as kids, we were all playing with our mentors or people who were older than us. And we know how to play a song and follow a singer. And that's why we had these jobs. And we believed every word that Gregg sang every night as much as his biggest fan in the front row.
Yeah.
and we just take our instruments and follow the voice.
Yeah.
That gig, if you followed the voice, you would never lose. He would always sell the story every single fucking time.
Every time.
But if you fought the voice, you could throw him off. You could throw somebody else off, and it could be a bad night. But the key thing in this band, especially when we got to the end, just following the voice, we all followed the voice, and we had these great shows. But they were a little bit more unconventional in terms of, you know, what the original tempo was, or, you know, what the pacing would usually be, or whatever all that shit. That shit doesn't matter.
Gregg Allman at 80% was better than most people at 100. He must have sung Melissa a million times, and the thing that made the hair go stand up on the back of my neck was every single time he did it, you believed it. And he sold it. It was like the first time he ever sang it. And I don't know how he did that, but that's what great singers can do. It's like he just could go to that place right away where it's like you believed it, he was totally in it. It didn't matter if his chops were a little down that night. It really did.
And for the last 4 years of his life, he would bring me around to play with other bands with him. Because he wouldn't play with anyone else without me there, because he'd been through experiences where these bands wouldn't follow his voice. I went through some experiences and saw some shows where he played with other bands, and the bands threw him under the bus. They didn't even know how to play with him, basically.
Well, your guys' job at some level is like being the piano player for Ella Fitzgerald or something. I mean,
Exactly.
You know,
Well, I used to call him
Ella
Frank
Fitzgerald's
Sinatra
the
of
boss,
rock and
and
roll.
the piano player plays whatever she wants. I mean,
I always thought of him as Frank Sinatra. I always looked at it as Frank Sinatra with the Quincy Jones Orchestra. That's how I always looked at it. That's the shit. It's got the precision, but it's got the authenticity, and it follows the thread of the voice. You know, it's like the band follows the breadcrumbs to the you know?
So we're going to have to stop pretty soon, but I want to make sure people have a chance for questions. Does anyone have something?
Yes.
Following up on what you were saying about his voice in the recording sessions,
Yeah.
I'd read somewhere, I don't know if it was internet or whatever, that he didn't seek treatment because he'd been told that if you seek treatment, even if you live, your voice is going to be gone. And that was one of the reasons.
Well,
he
it was a choice really between life and his voice.
Right, which is the same thing for him.
Just to give it some perspective, since he died in May 2017, when was that he booked the Savannah studio?
Could have been September of that year.
2016.
Yeah, it was like right after that summer. We'd had some canceled shows, and he was kind of struggling. And then we did his last show was the anniversary of his brother's death in Atlanta, so it was before that.
Okay.
No.
And I never really heard Gregg actually struggle to where it was noticeable until that one tour where he kept slowing everything down.
Yeah.
We played in Memphis. I don't remember when that was.
That was
though,
the
but-
summer of the 2016. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
that
Peter
was
Frampton
and
shows.
it was toward the end
Yeah,
of
we were
that
doing
tour,
the shows with
and
Frampton.
it was when he couldn't get enough air,
Yeah.
and then he couldn't get a breath quick enough, and so we had to slow down a lot to follow him
Right,
through
and
the songs.
I think the summary of what you guys are saying is just Gregg loved to play so much, so
Yeah.
he wanted to be out there so bad. He was trying to do shows he probably shouldn't have tried or whatever, but he wanted to. And it was also for whatever his own reasons, he wanted to keep his health things private. So, well, I think these guys have to get ready to perform. All right, thank you all for coming
Thank
out.
you guys so much, guys. Yeah, absolutely. It's great. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm gonna go start.